So much. Okay, so let's get into the investigation. This is the part that this is the meat of the lesson. So I'm going to try to do both parts, and it's 2:04. So guys, forgive me if we go over just a couple of minutes, but I'm going to hustle. Okay.
Hey, Kim.
So, yes.
This is Denny. I was just doing a little reading there on evidence-based practices for students with moderate and severe disabilities. And it was really suggesting for students to be able to answer questions in the social studies sector that using directed inquiry and KWHL charts and graphic organizers and pictures to help them formulate their ideas around those and to kind of pull those questions together in a manner, it's kind of explicitly teaching them about that would make a big difference. And so I just wanted to share that with the group.
Well, thank you.
And you go right ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
No. It's important you all say stuff. That's very important. But yeah, I mean, look at, like I showed you guys right there, those questions when I was going through those questions that or those statements that people were saying people look tired, that kind of thing. You saw how that gave us, and Denny, Denny Paul, you're a former social studies teacher, those big rocks. And I mean, those things they were recognizing are big rocks. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm going to give you, your kids are going to recognize 10 times more stuff. Because they, for those, that are able to look at those pictures and really engage in that. Our kids now, this generation, they are super visually connected. There's no other way. I mean, it's all about watching the YouTube videos, and it's all about looking at on pictures that, on Instagram and Snapchat and this whole kind of thing. They're so visual that when they were given a picture, they're going to see every part, and we're not. Notice that some of the things that we focused on the fact that it was a beach, that they looked tired, they were going to a new place, but your kids are going to see, I mean, somebody earlier said, what about the weapons? So your kids are going to focus on everything. So let's investigate, guys, so you can see what some of these lessons look like. This is the thing that Dionne was talking about earlier that's really important that we get to. So I really hope that you guys have used, like this template I've used. You can tell that we're talking about movement and migration. So I've been very intentional about including all of these maps. So the first question, now that we've staged it, now that we've got the kids thinking about migration, we need to move into the actual lesson. So my first supporting question with my kids is going to be, why did Europeans leave their homes to come to America? Now, notice how I very intentionally, worded that. The kids can conceive of the idea of leaving a home and going to someplace else. So I've included that in the question. But now we're making a very intentional connection between the Europeans and the Americans. So now you know that what we're talking about here. So these are the look at this, two terms, one economic, one geography. I'm getting too excited because it's toward the end of the day on a Friday. So these are our standards that we're looking at. Analyze how incentives and opportunity costs of that. I want to show you guys very quickly. And I've intentionally also, again, using that word, gone into opportunity costs and hyperlinked it. So let's hope and pray I can get back to this PowerPoint without opening it all up again. But I want to show you guys something, another one of those tools that you have, and that's why I've hyperlinked it to this. There is a glossary of terms that's included with the Kentucky Academic Standards for Social Studies. You can click on the hyperlink there, or you can go into, remember I showed you your standards resources? That was the other button. You had this side that said, explore your standards. Slow down, Kim. And then the other side that said standards resources. This is under standards resources. It defines all of these. So if you're looking at opportunity cost, you can just scroll right down here because there's about 19 pages of this. We're not going to take the time to do that, and actually find that and see that there. So it's pretty cool. And I went back to the Padlet and said, so once again, this is the third time I've opened it. So here we go. So sorry, you guys. I know you're like, Kim, I could really help you with some technology. Well, that's okay. I'm over here in this place all by myself. So at the moment, I'm just going to fake it till I make it, as they say. So let's go up here. So we're looking at, why did the Europeans leave their homes to come to America? So here's our two standards. So we're going to do a close reading. So using Newsela, for some of your all's districts may still have a Newsela account. It's incredibly expensive. I was very reluctant. But you can also find some of this on ReadWorks, but sometimes in terms of topic, I can't find it always on ReadWorks, but especially when you start looking at very specific things in terms of social studies, I was able to find some of that in Newsela. So the article that we're looking at, so Dionne, do you care to put the article in the chat there, please? So the technique that we're going to use with this, and she's going to put it in there, and I want you guys to go in and read that. So notice I'm using tell me why, then show me where. So what this is, and this is not some big fancy strategy, this is something that I would use with my kids. And I've seen teachers use a variation of this. So you're looking at your students, and she's got it in the chat there. So if you guys would go into that link there, please, and you should be able to access it. Let me know if they can't, Dionne.
Okay, I dropped it in an email to them also.
Oh, good.
And Kim, was able to download the PowerPoint and put that in as a link also, just the PDF version of it, but I may also have it in that one. So
Okay.
if anybody wants to just send me a message in the chat, I'll try to make sure you get access to the article.
Good. And I've got those 2 slides I've got to fix. Okay. But it's been a fast week. So as they read the article, and I'm going to try to do this again, what you guys want. So I'm going to go here and probably have to open this for a 10th time. Oh, no, I can access it. So for some reason, it has not let me access it here, Dionne, and yet I have an account. But I'm not signed in to do Zello. It's like, oh gosh. Heavens to Betsy. Let me go over here, and I made a copy of it on the Google Drive just in case I couldn't do that. Now, one thing about Newsella that we can't do here, so I'm going to open this up and let you guys look at it. So there's a couple of things that we would do. We've lowered this down to the textile level for 3rd grade, okay? So word count of only 382 words, so you can go through and look at this. One thing I'm going to do with my kids, though, before we start reading this, because again, you can tell that I'm a visual learner because I rely heavily on that. So one thing I'm going to do is, this is an engraving of the Ark Royal, and this was done around the time of Sir Walter Raleigh. So this was his ship. And I'm going to look at the kids and say, and we're going to do a little activity with it before we even start reading, because we're going to activate that curiosity. We're also going to potentially activate some prior knowledge. So we're going to look at this, and I'm going to tell the kids, we're going to do a little activity with this, guys, before we read. We're going to do I notice and I wonder. So for those of you that have already finished reading it, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the question out loud. And what you guys will also notice that on your sheet, because we are talking about the supporting questions and how to teach some of this, that I have not given you guys this regimented, fill in the blank or anything like that I've done. So what we do at this point, so you can go there to that first question, says, why did Europeans leave their homes to come to America? You've got space in there to write down some of the activities that we're doing, what we talk about it, or you can actually do the activity there. We've got about 4 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and stop it because I don't want this to go off in your all's ears. So the question that we have then is, why did Europeans leave their homes to come to America? So I'm going to have that question on the board. So I'm going to ask you guys, so you're going to tell me, and then you're going to tell me where you found it, and you're going to read us the sentence, but your kids could actually physically show you one here. And again, I'm using this technique initially with my kids to get them in the habit of reading, to answer a supporting question, but most importantly, starting to use evidence. So we're scaffolding this. So tell me why, which is, why did Europeans leave their homes to come to America? So who would like to open their mic and be the first to volunteer? Tell me why they moved, and you can think of just one specific group or whatever it may be, but tell me why Europeans left their homes to come to America. And I may just choose somebody randomly. No, I'm not, because see, notice how they invoked fear in some people's hearts. That's why I hated to do that in the classroom too. So who would like to tell us why the Europeans left their homes? 5, and I will maybe go to somebody. 4, 3, 2.
They left for religious freedoms.
They were okay. Who was that that took the bullet for the team? That was awesome. Okay.
That was me, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So Brian, tell me where, because in this case you have to tell me, you can't show me. Tell me where you found that in the story or in the article.
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, well, you're right. That's the good news. But keep going. So if you go up here, let me go back to the article. Oops, it's not going to let me. Jeez. I'll give you a minute there to find. Does anybody have it there that you want to help him out and say, oh, it's right here. It says this, because he's right. So I know that he's right because he saw it there. Or maybe that's in the other article that we read. There's another article that we're going to see in a minute. So what are the different reasons that they came to America? Somebody else take one. Why did Spain come to America? I'll go ahead and click on it again and pull it down. Oh, I did it again. Jeez. Let me go up here and get it. So we come up here or come down here. So one of the reasons why they left, or why Spain came here, is it said that they that said by 1600, countries became very rich from ocean travel. Spain became the ruler of the seas. It sent large groups of ships across the Atlantic Ocean. They carried gold, silver, jewels, and chocolate back to Spain. So what's going to be one of the things that one of your all's kids may pick up in that sentence right there?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. That's what I picked up on. So one of the reasons why they came here, though, was for gold, silver, and jewels. And we're going to know that Spain did that. So someone else give me another reason why they came here, why they, left their homes and came to America. And I'll scoot it down here so you can see the British, so you can see the English. Why did the English come? Was it similar to the Spanish? When you look at this section right here. So somebody just grab onto that and let us know. I'm thinking, let's go down here to, let's see, who's somebody that we've talked to? Or we haven't talked to, that would be, well, Brandy, we've talked to you today. Brandy, why does it say here in this last section right here? So tell us, so what's another reason why they came to America? See, some of you guys may be having to deal with end of school stuff, and I realize that. Or Rhoda, I see you there looking at the screen. And Amy, so any of you all that would like to jump in on that one.
Well, from that last passage, I can't see that.
Yeah.
It appears they wanted to create their own empire.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it funny how they, something I think is interesting and something I didn't even realize till I read this was that the English actually hired Spanish pilots because they wanted to be able to get back to the New World. I thought that was interesting. But the British wanted to make their own empire too, because it says right here, the British began writing books on piloting and navigation, but it goes on down here and it says that they were actually looking to, to do the same things as Spain did. So your kids can go through and read this and look at this and you can talk to them. And another thing up here, at the beginning of it, it talks about how Christopher Columbus came here because he was looking for a route to Asia. Why did they want to go to Asia? So again, you guys, we're not going to do this article quickly with your kids. This is something that you're going to read out loud with your kids. By the way, Newsella, just like ReadWorks does, has it read out loud. So you're going to look at your kids and say, why did the Europeans leave to come to America? And in this case, you might even say the Americas, okay? So your kids are going to go recognize that Spain did it, that Portugal did it, and that England did it. But in all of this article, what it mainly focuses on, that's one thing, Brian, you're right, but it's in the other article, because I got to thinking about it, it's in the other one that talks about the religious freedom. It talks about, so you're going to process with your kids. So let me go back into the PowerPoint. So once we identify why they left to come to the New World, and I'm going to go back to slide 51 here. Again, you're going to be the dedicated reporter. So we're going to write these reasons on the board, or, and we're going to help those kids recognize, and they're going to tell us where in the articles that they saw that, or where they remembered hearing it. Because if you're going to read this out loud, he goes, didn't you say that? And you're going to help the kids look, because you guys remember, we're going to scaffold this skill. For one thing, what you guys have noticed is that we're doing very different thinking with social studies. I know we had a little bit of lag there with the article, and plus I can also know that it's the last hour of the day of school. I know that. So, but when we look at this and you think about what these kids have to do, they're going to be reading this article. This is actually a secondary source. That was a primary source that was in it. That picture is a primary source. So we're going to do that. I notice and I wonder, like I noticed that the ships were really big. I wonder if they were, and again, you guys, you modeled this in the beginning for the kids, because this, like Dionne said earlier, these are very different skills. These social studies standards do not look like, it's not this whole idea of saying Spain came to the New World, England came to the New World, France came to the New World, Spain did this, England did this, France did this. The whole idea is to look at why did they come to the New World and how did the New World change because they came here. And you can see in that article that it talks about that, because especially if you up the Alexile a little bit to 5th grade, it goes more into depth about what happened because they came here. So again, we're going to modify to the need and the ability of our students. Most importantly, the teacher is going to be the dedicated reporter. So what we do when we do this, and I didn't get a chance to model this with you guys because we're going to go through several of these. When you do the first read, okay, because again, it's something that dawned on me too while you guys were looking at this. These standards are so new and so different. that we may not have a full connection to how we teach those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. When you do the first read, and I'm going to really recommend you do all three, which I know you guys do that all the time anyway. That first read, and I also want to talk a little bit about teaching the vocabulary, and we'll come back to it. First read, so Newsella, just like ReadWorks, has the read aloud component. That if so the students that are looking at it, they can press that read aloud button. So they're going to read the article aloud without discussion. The second time you read it, or the third, because if they need more than one reading, obviously we're going to do that. When they go into the second read, that's when you're going to stop and teach the vocabulary. And just like ReadWorks, Newsella also has a vocabulary component that they recognize the vocabulary. The reason why we're going to teach the vocabulary in context is so that when it talks about, like for instance, the ships, that's why it has the wood cutting with it. Now we can move back up to the top and look at this picture. Because did you notice there were smaller ships? Why is there a big ship and why is there smaller ships? So again, I noticed the big ship and I wonder why they have smaller ships with them. Just like you guys saw in the picture of the Pilgrims coming to Plymouth, you saw they had the big ship, but they had to have the smaller ships to bring the people into shore. And I'm quite sure that that ship never came that close. That looked awfully close in that picture. You can tell that picture was, was painted long after. So we had to get our kids. So we're going to stop and we're going to teach that. Again, you guys, it may take one whole entire day or two with this article, but look at the content that you're getting as you do this. Then the third time you read it is when they read it to answer the question, why did Europeans leave their homes to come to America? So you're going to mostly be focusing on Spain and England. And notice how it is purely financial initially. But I want you guys to look down here. Now, this is a using evidence standard. Remember, I told you earlier, using evidence is where we start thinking of the component of assessment. So this is right here, 5.I.UE.2. Use evidence to develop claims in response to compelling and supporting questions. When Rhoda said, oh my heavens, Rhoda, just forgot. Oh, they came because they wanted to build an empire like Spain did. That was her claim. So then we had to look at the evidence, and she's going down there into that, and she was saying, it says this right here, that they were looking for this. In the beginning part of it, your students may say because they were looking for a way to get to Asia. They are correct. The Europeans left to find this because they were looking for another route to Asia, thanks to Christopher Columbus. The student who answers that supporting question in that way is correct. Caitlin, this goes back to your kid about not being wrong, because this is what historians do, you all. They have primary and secondary sources that support their thinking, and they construct claims around that, and that's why they get on television and they have their claims to make. There we go. So our students we're going to be teaching our students to do the exact same thing. Notice there it says claim. Claim is in that glossary of terms, I'm pretty sure. So a claim basically is a person's position based on evidence. So your students claim, they've got their claim, and now based in evidence, they're going to support that. So that's why I was telling the kids, tell me why, then show me where, or tell me where. And that's what the kids are doing. They're tell me why is their claim, show me where is their evidence. So there we go. So they're using evidence to develop claims. So that's why this was, and no, because your kids are not going to come into the room thinking, I want to talk about the European. No, even my AP kids didn't necessarily come in saying, being all ready to talk about why the Europeans left their home. Okay, but that's a big thing of what we talked about. So now let's go into, so now what I do with you guys. So this is one thing that you had mentioned. I think, did you give them a copy of the reading and writing standards, Dionne? Have you already put that in the link, or are you getting ready to send it to them?
I haven't dropped it in there yet, but I was getting ready to make that point. So on that slide that Kim had just a second ago. So after we did the reading article, so what we're thinking about is how do we work smarter with that and not harder? But so we already have those reading standards that we address. So we could address things like main idea, because we're reading that passage. So we're teaching multiple standards at one time. So we can also have them do a writing, with a claim, because that's what we do, if we're thinking about that in terms of a writing, or how we have them do something responding. right? So I was just thinking about that. So, what the idea is that we take the social studies and we connect reading and writing. And so when you're teaching this thematically, then you're able to address multiple standards. So like you already were able to hit 2 standards on, the social studies standards for 5th grade, right? So you addressed 2 of those standards already that Kim talked about with you all. But then we're thinking about what other standards and how are we connecting it all together. So when you sit down to use this, then you have your text that you have for, you could use for your reading standards. So how do you use your reading text? How do you use this as a comprehension sample, right? So you're working on comprehension. How do you make that a work sample with that? How do you use that vocabulary from that same unit? So you're teaching vocabulary, you can teach it with the social studies content, etc. But that was the whole idea, was to make sure if we're connecting an article to it, then we know what that reading standard is. So if I was going to use this one in terms of, I might have, an inferencing, there's a standard around inferring, and that's asking kids at 4th and 5th grade level have to infer. But at the 2nd grade level, it's asking who, what, when, where, and why questions, right? So that's really back to that same kind of thing. And then the strategy that Kim shared would be a specially designed instructional strategy, right? Is a closed strategy. So that can be part of your SDI. So we're talking about especially designed instruction, modeling. So we can use all of those things that we're doing with IEP and monitoring around specially designed instruction to the same thing. So it's really all connected together around, but making it, maximizing the use of our time. But that's why I liked it so well, that we're bringing in an article, we're bringing in those assessment pieces as we're going along. We're progress monitoring, we're checking how they're doing on comprehension, we're also teaching the social studies standards, and then we're teaching that in context, right? It all makes sense together. And so that we don't isolate, like trying to figure out what to teach with, if we knew in 5th grade that our big theme is colonization. And so as we choose text to support what, like those pictures and things like that. So we know kids can do social studies content through those, we have them given pictures, maps, ways to make some inquiry, so that we're asking questions and we're teaching them to inquire. It gets at that higher level. So it's not just at the standard. Sometimes when they go back and we looked back at the way, like work samples and examples for things like that, that we're not getting all the way down to the depth of knowledge that they're expecting the kids to be able to do if we just teach the 13 colonies, right? But this is really that deeper understanding and way we can get to that next level of that, what's expected with the standard, even though we know that it's not at that same level, but that we can reduce the text, we can use all kinds of other ways, but how do we connect it all back together?
So, and that's automatically, I know I'm going to go to reading informational, because the skills that you're going to be practicing when you go into those standards, go into reading informational. Because the thing we keep telling folks, especially when you're talking K3, sometimes we work with K3 teachers, they're like, well, I don't have time to teach social studies. Well, here's the thing, is that when you look at reading informational and reading literary, and you can take the, standard number 3, whatever it may be, and stack them side by side, it's the same exact skills, but what changes is the text that you use. So you're teaching those reading and writing standards when you're doing social studies, especially now, the way that it's set up. So you guys can see here, we had a picture. I want you guys to look at those interdisciplinary practices when you look at that list. Number 1 is recognizing that anything that communicates a message is a text. So that picture that I told you that we would do, that we would look at it and we would do, I notice, I wonder. Again, give your kids time to process that picture, because there's going to be a whole big chunk of history in that picture. So the kids are going to look at that. So now they're going to be ready, because they know they're going to be talking about ships and they're going to be talking about travel. They're ready to go into that article. So they have the article on the crossing, the image from it, and then you also had the picture with the QFT, the pictures of the pilgrims coming over. So we're doing that activity before we do that. There's all kinds of visual cues, because for your kids that have a different on-off ramp when it comes to reading and writing, boy, howdy, they may really love those pictures. And that's going to be one way to really connect them to the topic and to the content. So there we go. So we know reading information is going to be a big part of when you look at this step with social studies, but the interdisciplinary practices are going to be huge. So what we're going to have the kids do then, we're going to do all this work. So like you talked about writing, whether we're going to have them speaking mostly. So it's going to be speak to text. It's going to be Flipgrid. It's going to be Seesaw. They can even draw a picture, or they can cut out pictures and make it a poster out of it. But we're going to ask them, why did the Europeans leave their homes to come to America? You guys, like I said earlier, A lot of these, when you all look at them, especially initially, it's going to take you 2 to 3 days to teach some of these. Okay, because you're going to have to take those kids through their modifications, and we're going to have to make sure that we meet them where they are so they're able to process all of this. So
Can I
that
jump in?
means-
Sorry, Kim, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to jump in before you went on, talking about the alternate assessment targets, right? We're not talking about the standards, but we're talking about the alternate assessment targets. So if I pull back and looked at the reading for informational standard, it's the Kentucky 5.1. Here's the Kentucky Academic Standard. And I'm looking at test window 2 right now, but I'm looking at, it says, quote accurately from the text when explaining what the text says, explicit, and when drawing inferences from the text. So part of that, like looking at those pictures, and we're making inferences about like they're moving, they're traveling, those kinds of things. So the alternate assessment target, it says there's no limitations. All part of the Kentucky Academic Standard are eligible to be included as an assessment item. So we're looking at that as the alternate assessment target. We're looking at that particular standard. So that one is telling us to quote accurately from a text when explaining what the text says explicitly. So what you're talking about is pulling the evidence out, saying this is why we're saying this about why we think they're coming, right? We look at this ship and we think this is why they're coming there, or it's because they want to be the empire. They wanted to have established their own empire. They're making an inference. Again, that goes directly back to that Kentucky Academic Standard for information. And then we're looking at that alternate assessment target. So it has no limitation on it. So we have to think about, why not go ahead and teach both of them, right? We're teaching those at the same time. We're teaching those things. We may have different work samples. We may have some different question sets, comprehension questions, those kinds of things, ones that get around the inferencing, but it's all connected back. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that was important that we go back and talk about, when we look at the Kentucky Academic Standard, and then we look at that alternate assessment target for that grade level. And I just wanted to use that one for 5th grade. Since you were, I didn't want to, so.
Yeah, I need you to do that, because that's where you plug in. I plug in one way and we meet in the middle. So this is beautiful. So the other thing I want you guys to think about, so how would you modify this lesson to your students' needs? And most importantly, what would you need to teach this lesson? So you guys, one thing I really want you to think about doing, and she's going to be giving you a survey, a feedback kind of thing, but I want to give, I would like to send something to you guys that are here today to ask you what you need from me, especially in terms of content and things like that you may need to really teach a lot of this stuff. However this whole thing works out with the pandemic, I would, there's a part of me, I would love to come into your classrooms, but we'll talk about that another day. That may be a dream I have. So now, again, the next question that we're going to look at, and again, I'm not going to go into the lesson necessarily this time, and I hate that, but we've got 2 big pieces, two big rocks we got to move. And this is another one. So how did the Europeans make America their new home? Again, you guys have really simplified the question, but the content and the concept within it is still complex. But I've simplified the question so I can ask them, to get them thinking in terms of that, using 2 geography standards for this one. We're going to be using a variety of maps, satellite images, and other models. So that again is one of our standards, but explaining how cultural and environmental changes impact population distribution and influence how people modify, there's our word, and adapt to their environments. So let me show you how we did that in this lesson. And I really would love for you guys to try these lessons. So this lesson, like I've got to here at the bottom, may take 2 to 3 days, and actually may take 3 to 4 when you see how big this is, because this actually has 2 parts. This has a lot of little, but I've kept it very clear. So source number 1 is reading the article once again. So it's using the same close reading strategies. First time to read, second time to teach vocabulary, maybe even a third time to teach vocabulary. And then the third or fourth time that you read it is when you're going to use it to answer the question, how did the Europeans make America their new home? So you can see in that article, I won't open that up, but hopefully when you guys get the PDF of this, and Dionne, we may take it out of the Google Drive thing and let me fix those 2 slides and then put it back in. So we'll give them a PDF of this, and all of these links. Well, Newzella, you may have to, we'll talk about that. But anyway, so hopefully if your district doesn't have one, we'll see what we can do. So what I'm doing for my graphic organizer is I have the New England colonies on this Jamboard. That was going to be for us to do here today, but I can see, because we only had 15 minutes to do each of these. Here we have the middle colonies, and here we have the southern colonies. So how do they use the land where they settled is going to be the sub question. It's going to be the little question I use to look at all of these. When you look at this slide here, I mean, at this article. This article talks about the New England colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. And it keeps it very direct. And it talked about how each of them had a specific type of crop that they grew, or they had a specific type of industry that they did. And you guys, again, we've got it down to the 3rd grade level. So that's why I say you may have to read it 3 to 4 times. So when you look at that and you realize how so we've got all of that listed. So integrate evidence that draws information from. So we're going to create a graphic. So we've got those 3 things. I may even have 3 posters hanging up, and I'm going to ask my kids that. They can maybe draw a picture and I'm going to stick it to the chart. They may tell me out loud what it's going to be. They may pull a picture off the web and send it to me, and I'm going to put that up there. So we're going to talk about each of these colonies. So how did they change the land? What did they do to the land? Well, in Virginia, the southern colonies, they had cotton, but most of all, they had tobacco. Tobacco was the number 1. And then eventually they do indigo, and then they do rice. So you're going to see that in the South. And it talks about that in the article. It mostly focuses on tobacco though. And then, and then also what I'm going to do is show my kids some pictures of the different colonies. And I'm going to show them different types of housing, like, what was similar about their housing and everything that I want to look at. So I'm going to bring in some pictures to do that. Also, and you guys see we have, oops, let me go back one. Oh dear. Okay. So now on the second day, I have a map of the 13 colonies, and I'm going to show you guys that map. But then I have a video, and you start at the 40-second mark and you go to the 2-minute and 54-second mark, and it basically repeats the article. It's like it's like a visual of the article itself that they just read. So again, we're reinforcing that. We're finding a new avenue, a new venue to bring the information in on. But that gives us the opportunity to watch, pause, collect the evidence. Watch, pause, collect the evidence with the students at their pace and at their ability, because I think that is so important. And again, you guys, constantly talking about how did the Europeans make America their new home? So we're talking about how they changed the land, what their houses may have looked like, all of that. And then as we do that, where we're also going to notice how I've got here, students will color the map and annotate it. One thing I want to talk to you guys about in terms of teaching geography, and I think I may have it on the next slide. Let me go here and get this. Okay, I didn't put this one on here. When our students are using maps, and so we're talking about the satellite images and everything else that we're bringing in, and again, because we're really close to time here, I want you guys to look at the assessment piece. We're going to give you, by the way, a full lesson that we're going to get this whole full unit, and it's going to be built on around slow down, Kim. I do, we do, you do. Okay. All of that's going to be set up on that. We're going to get you guys this lesson. We're going to have all the resources attached to it and everything so that you guys can use this with your students. That is so incredible. So please don't think that we're just like showing you this model and just saying, oh yeah, this looks real good. Thank you all so much. No, there's going to be support behind this. We want to see, we would love for you guys. I would love, definitely, because I would love to see you guys use this unit and reflect within it and kind of talk back to me. And so Dionne, make a note of that. I would love for us to talk about that, like to literally test drive this unit and have them do it and maybe respond back to us. For those of them that have, 5th grade. So we're going to use the map, which is going to be source number 1. And we're going to guide the students to the story, and what this map does basically, and again, I can't pull this up now because we'll go back out of it. But this map lets them look at the 13 colonies and their geography around them. It shows the Appalachian Mountains. It shows how close they live to what. It shows the areas where they have lots of rivers. So we're going to talk to those students and say, well, what about where they live made them want to live there? And getting the students thinking about that, we're going to see that, like, for especially, when we remember that very first activity we did, we asked the students where they wanted to live, and they started talking about the reasons why they wanted to live there. We're going to say, well, why do you think they wanted to live here? Because it was very close to the shore. It was going to be easy traveling. They live near a lot of rivers. No, are your kids going to pick up on this right off the bat? No, we're going to guide them to that, because the big thing for your kids is to understand the why and the how. It's not just memorizing that, in Virginia, Jamestown was right off the James River, and saying you need to know the James River. You just need to understand, what our kids need to understand is why a river is important, because a river meant you could feed your crops, or you could water your crops rather, and most importantly, that you could travel, that you would have access to trade. So we're going to give our kids every opportunity to see that. That's why it's also a part of this. Highly recommend, go onto Google. These places that you're talking about, go onto Google Maps. Let them look at satellite images of these places. And if you see a whole lot of green, then you know that's a good place to live, because that means vegetation is going to grow there. Help the kids to see that. You may have a student that already kind of does that, that loves that. But the other thing we're going to do with our kids, again, is this is a map that I'm going to link into this. This is a map that has, okay, I'm just dying to show you this. I'm going to go show you this one. This is the one we're going to use as the graphic organizer. This is their organizational task. And you guys can see here, it's got this reading that goes with each of these. So here we have, okay, it talks about the 13 original colonies that they call them Northern here. Most of the time we call them the New England. Then we have the middle colonies and the Southern colonies. And they're going to color those, and they're going to color those in. Then most importantly, what they can do here, in case you're talking about it, you're going to give them the opportunity to print off little pictures. Like here in Virginia, I would get a little tobacco leaf and, and have this, and have that printed off and let the students tape that on there so they can see the tobacco grows there. When you come up here, I'm probably going to have fish out in the ocean, because fishing was a big industry for the New England colonies. And then we'd have ships up there because they built ships. So we're going to have these things that, and have them copied so they can take them and they can place them there so they can understand how those industries were so important to them. And then again, notice how we're always giving them multiple ways to communicate this. How did the Europeans make America their new home? Is it a big, no, it could be 1, 2, 3 sentences tops. The thing is, and we always remind them, tell me why you know this. How do you know that, what you're saying to be true? We're always going to link them to their claim, just like you do in language arts. They're going to, or excuse me, reading and writing. They're going to have to tell us their claim, why they think that, what they think, and then they're going to have to show us from the evidence why they think that. And they're going to have to bring that whole thing together in the different formats they have. Now let's do a final assessment. We're going to look at, by the way, we were going to come in and talk about this, but look at what you have. You have a video, which was informative. You had an article, which was nonfiction, a map of the colonies. And then we're going to talk about those other sources, which would have been the satellite images and everything. So let's go on to the summative assessment. So now you guys are going to, now, by the way, we have 2 more lessons that are part of this. We had another question is, how do they govern themselves? And now I can't remember the other one. It'll come to me in a minute. So there are 4 questions within this that you guys will look at with your kids. And that would really establish thinking about, why the Europeans came over. So again, a really huge rock in 4th and 5th grade. So when we think of, so what I wanted to do for you guys is I wanted to dissect a communicating conclusions standard. So you guys will see how that applies. Now, when we read this, it sounds all fancy. So you can see here, construct explanatory products using reasoning, correct sequencing examples and details with relevant information and data. That's a mouthful. To convey the diverse perspectives that impacted the founding of the United States. This is why it's so important to deconstruct the standard. There's a lot of bells and whistles with this one. So first we got to understand, what is an explanatory product? Anything, any format or design that allows the student to communicate their reasons why people move. Okay, that's numero uno. They can do a poster, they can do anything. Use reasoning, correct sequence. So here's the details of the standard, but here's what it looks like. Students make direct reference to evidence from any or all of the sources. This is why we give them access to anything they have done. Any of the organizational tasks that we've done is right there in front of them, you guys. I would do this with every kind of student in a building, because when they're writing these essays, this idea they have to put all this stuff in their head. Does a historian write a book from memory? No. They sit in a room, they sit at a desk with every piece of evidence they have ever collected. Like I can see David Blight, who just wrote this huge tome on Frederick Douglass. It really is about that thick. Did he sit in a room and just remember everything? No, he had all of his he probably had a whole corner of his house that he took away from the whole family. And he's this gargantuan room where he has all these resources and sources in there that he pulls in to write about Frederick Douglass. Your kids are going to have all of that in front of them. Now, I know you guys are saying, Kim, they're going to be overwhelmed. Well, we're not just going to throw it there in front of them. We're going to sit down and say, why did they move? Now, you guys, again, I know you're going to have to repeat this with them sometimes and things like that. But why did they move? The kid said, where can we go find that? And we're going to help those kids start to pull in. like she said, these work samples that these kids are producing, they can be used to inform their thinking around this assessment. Then this fancy part here that says to convey the diverse perspectives that impacted the founding of the United States. So in this case, the students will be communicating why they think that the Europeans came and made it their own country. And we're going to go here and show you what our final looks like. This is it right here. Create a poster. This is what I would give to my kids. This is what they would see in 5th grade, especially in the alternate assessment classroom. Create a poster, Flipgrid, story map, and I put etc. because I'm going to list everything that explains why people move using the example of the Europeans coming to America and making their this new world their home. There's a question for their final assessment. All of this appears in this. So it's not that we're going to write it all fancy and put it out there in front of them. We're going to make sure we're very direct and very clear about our expectation. And we're also going to make sure that this expectation, this assessment meets the expectation of the standard. Now, I know we've got 1 minute left, but I'd like to ask you guys, can you all see that now that we're looking at it like this on the screen? Can you see that? I saw you nod your head, Rhoda. I appreciate that. Thank you, friend. So that being said.
Yeah, and Kim, the folks are responding in the chat. Yes. So it's
Okay.
making sense and connecting.
And you guys, this is, so for some of you all, this is the first time you've really had a chance to dive into these standards. And so we're going to talk more about that too. So when you guys look at this, so I want to ask you all, how would you need to support your students to complete this assessment? I hope I gave you some ideas, like talking about having everything right there in front of them, have everything still on the wall and on the boards, have all those charts you guys created, have all of it right there in front of them. And that way they get in that habit of thinking and connecting and supporting, you know, having their own claim, knowing their reasons why they chose it, and going and using that evidence to support why they chose that.